Special episode of Money Matters coming to you from the Al-Bukhari Foundation here in Kuala Lumpur. We're honored to have with us Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, who will be talking about his book, Capturing Hope, The Struggle Continues for a New Malaysia. I'm Zahil Calvinong Abdullah, and this is Money Matters. Welcome to the program, Tun.
Thank you.
It's an honor having you on Money Matters. Before we talk about the book, can I ask you about the reopening of more than 90% of the economic sectors and the resumption of most of the social activities? Of course, this recovery is also with the high vaccination rate. So in this aspect, do you think that our economy is on the right track to recovery?
Well, the start of all these industries will definitely contribute towards the growth of the economy. But of course, the projection is very optimistic because it's not just the start, but what happens on the ground. What I find is that many ideas were brought up, policies were enunciated, but on the ground, they couldn't interpret and implement the policies that is determined by the government. So I would say that there would be improvement, but it will not be as good as predicted.
Right. So basically you're saying that the Rakyat doesn't really understand what the policies have been put in place for them?
No, I think that the policies can be enunciated. That is the easy part. But the people who are going to implement on the ground, they may not understand as well as the planners as to what to do in order to improve the performance. So because of that, usually the prediction is very good, but there are many other factors that affect the performance which may not contribute as much as was expected. And therefore, the projection would be optimistic.
Right. So, optimistic for a recovery, but we are more or less on that right track with the correct implementation on the ground.
Yeah, that is true. We know what we would like to see happen, but whether it will happen depends upon all the players playing their role and understanding their responsibilities and their contribution to the objective of the government.
Right. Tun, can we talk about your book, Capturing Hope, The Struggle Continues for a New Malaysia? Any particular reason why the book was launched at this juncture?
Well, I think the book should have been launched earlier, accepting that there were some technical problems. But I think things are changing very fast in Malaysia. Many things are happening. And even though I had launched this book, there are lots of other things that should be included in the book. But I cannot wait for a long time because I need to give my opinion on certain issues which I think is very important for Malaysia.
Right. Now, Tun, in your book, you also talk about the Pakatan Harapan election promises, right? And you said it was clear by mid-August 2018, your government could not fulfill all the promises, as you said, I quote, new laws had to be passed and old ones modified, unquote. Was it because of time that it couldn't be done?
Well, some of the things cannot be done, actually, like abolishing toll. You cannot do that. On the other hand, many laws are connected to the Constitution, and anything that impinges on the Constitution can only be passed by Parliament if it has a two-thirds majority. But the government did not have a two-thirds majority. Even when we wanted to MA 63, for example, We wanted to do through, but we need two-thirds. We couldn't achieve the two-thirds first time. Of course, now they have done it because they achieved the two-thirds because it involves the constitution.
Right.
So many of the laws could not be changed because the constitution has to be amended, and for amendment of the constitution, you need to have a two-thirds majority.
Right. So do you think because the election promises were not fulfilled, do you think this hurt the credibility of your government at that time in the eyes of the Rakyat?
Well, of course, for the Rakyat, it is very simple. They say that you have promised, now fulfill the promise. But to fulfill the promise, we need a good majority. The Rakyat did not give us a good majority, just a simple majority, not a two-thirds majority. During my time as first time as Prime Minister, I had a two-thirds majority, and I could change the constitution because I am certain the Parliament will approve it by two-thirds majority.
Tun, hold that thought. We've just got to go for a very quick commercial break. So stay with us and find us on Twitter and let us know what you think of the program. So stay tuned. Welcome back to Money Matters. We're talking to Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad. Now, Tun, in your chapter, which I'm going to read here, A Vision for Shared Prosperity, you mentioned the urgent need to tackle the economic and financial distress besetting the country, and that the new economic policy, NEP, was not really achievable. So ensuring that every Malaysian had access to fair share of wealth, basically this couldn't be achieved?
Yeah, we have other methods of achieving a fair distribution of wealth. The NEP failed because the recipients of the beneficiaries, the Malays, when given opportunities, did not make use of the opportunities. And because of that, the NEP failed, but not altogether. In the field of education, for example, the NEP achieved great success. We produce more doctors, more lawyers from among the Malays than it was prevalent before. But in business requires a certain culture, and the Malays don't have that culture. They are not patient. When given an opportunity, their tendency is to sell the whatever it is that they got. Whether it is a contract, a license, or an AP, they sell. And of course, after that, they lost out. The people who bought, they made money. They succeeded. So this time around, we decided that if we give them an opportunity and they sell the opportunity, it is invalidated. It's no longer acceptable. If they cannot do it, they have to surrender to the government or have some arrangement with other Bumi Putras.
Right. But I'm sure that didn't go down well with some quarters that you wanted to implement that, right?
Yeah, of course, people want to have quick money. But what I'm suggesting is a more permanent change that will help us to reduce the disparity in terms of wealth between the different races.
Now, Tun, your chopsticks remark at the launch of your book, of course, it appears to attract a lot of attention, but they did not really get what you were trying to say. Am I correct?
Yes, I was just trying to show how different it is between the two cultures. And I could have used other examples, but this is very obvious. You see, one takes food with using chopstick, the other using fork and spoon or with a hand. It shows the difference. I'm not saying that the chopstick is inferior or whatever. It's just a difference.
Right. So again, this boils down to people not understanding you. So it goes to the title of your book that says, "The struggle continues for a new Malaysia." So people really sometimes don't really get it.
Yeah, that is true. But they tend to see things only from their own angle. And because they are talking about differences, confrontation between races, well, chopstick. Why should he say this thing about chopsticks? It's nothing. It's just an example of the difference between the races.
Right. But do you also think that's been politicized as well?
Well, of course, the politicians can seize on anything that you say and politicize it.
Right. Okay, Tun. Now, you said that the next election will be the last chance to clean up the country. The chance had been given to Pakatan Harapan in 2018 for this cleaning up job, so to speak. So by resigning from the Prime Minister's seat, do you think that you disable Pakatan's struggle to eradicate corruption in the country?
No. I resigned because my party has rejected me, no longer had faith in me, and also because Pakatan Harapan itself is being overthrown by the defection from among its members. So when the Pakatan Harapan is not the government, I cannot be the Prime Minister. So it is the decision of Pakatan Harapan that made it, inevitable that I should step down as Prime Minister.
So why do you think they lost faith in you?
No, they didn't lose faith in me. It's only that Muhyiddin had taken a chunk, Muhyiddin and Azmin had taken a chunk of the supporters of Pakatan Harapan, so much so that the Pakatan Harapan loses its majority.
Right. So, talking about Pakatan's 10 pledges made after winning the last general election was to institute RCI, Royal Commission of Inquiry, into the 1MDB scandal. So Pakatan said it was serious in combating corruption. But after 22 months of helming the government, there was no sign of the RCI. Was there a reason why there wasn't?
Well, we are looking forward to the court, the police taking up this matter in the courts, and the courts will then try the case, and you have there will be overlapping. If you have RCI, and then the court has to hear the case, who are you going to believe? Because only one institution should be dealing with 1MDB, and we think that there were enough evidence for the case to be brought before the court and for the court to decide whether there was any wrongdoings or not.
Right. So basically, it was in the election promise as well to look into this and put it on RCI. So basically, this was something else that couldn't be fulfilled too?
Yeah. Well, the RCI was proposed without our believing that we would win the election. Now, if we had lost the election, the RCI can still be put up by the government. And then, of course, there will be no court hearing because already the AG had said that there are no cases against Najib. But and RCI can be set up by the government at that time, not us, and we can hear the whole story.
Right. Tun, hold that thought again. We've just got to go for a final commercial break, so stay with us and we'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Money Matters. We're talking to Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad. Now, Tun, you've also mentioned, Tun, that you do not believe in new taxes for the public because it will burden them. So how do you propose new areas of revenue to replenish the nation's coffers?
Grow the economy. If we grow the economy, our economy is not fully grown because there are so many opportunities which have not been exploited. Under a good government, a stable government, the economy can grow very fast, much faster. We may even attain 8% growth every year. That will give the business people will have made good profits, and government revenue would increase.
Right. You've also said that when you resign as Prime Minister, on both accounts, none of the succeeding Prime Ministers bothered or were interested in solving outstanding bilateral issues with Singapore. But during both your times as Prime Minister, were there issues and outstanding problems that you basically managed to solve with Singapore?
Well, it's difficult dealing with Singapore. Singapore insists that we should solve all the problems at the same time. Not only the water price, but also the fact that people, Malaysians from Sabah and Sarawak, when they leave, they stop working in Singapore, they can take back their contribution to the Provident Fund. But Malaysians from the peninsula cannot. They treat us as if we are two different countries. That is something that we need to resolve. And there are a few others, small matters that needs to be resolved other than the water price.
Right. Tun, political stability. Now, confidence and supply deals between the government and the opposition. Do you think this arrangement could pave the way for political stability?
It could, but it should not be selective. What happened is that only not all the opposition members were involved. Only certain parties. And it looks as if it is a bribe almost, that these parties will get government allocations because they agreed. Those who don't agree cannot get. But if they are willing to give this to every member of the opposition, then of course we are willing to accept, because it doesn't tie us down to supporting the government.
Right. But also, very importantly, foreign investors will look at political stability in the country before deciding whether they should come in. And they can also look at the other countries, our neighbors, so to speak, to look at their political stability as well.
Well, political stability is very important for attracting foreign investment. In Malaysia today, there is no political stability simply because the people elected the government, and then through the back door, the government was overthrown and a new government set up, and that government was again overthrown by the same method, and a new government set up. There are now 3 governments within a period of 3 years, 3 governments. That means that there is no political stability, because each government will want to introduce its own policy, its own way of doing things, and people feel uncertain. And the civil servants themselves are confused. They have to serve 3 different governments, each with different ideas. So they also not able to perform as efficiently as they should when the government is not changed every now and then.
Right. This question, of course, is on everyone's mind too. And will you defend your parliamentary seat in Langkawi?
Well, my voters, my constituent wants me to defend it, but I think I'm 96 years old. I think it's time for others to take over. But I will lend complete support for whoever is made the candidate. But of course, my own party insists that I should stand.
Yeah. So you are basically still considering it. You haven't really said no yet.
I cannot say no because it disappoints my people.
Right. So are you not ruling out a 3rd term as our country's leader?
No, I think there will be too good a record, being the Prime Minister for the second time at the age of 92 was already unusual, but to be again appointed as Prime Minister for the third time, I think is not possible.
Right. Tun, it's been a pleasure having you on Money Matters. Continue watching the Money Matters interview with Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad on Buletin TV3 YouTube channel. On behalf of the Money Matters team, we'd like to wish all Malaysians a very Merry Christmas to those who are celebrating. I'm Zahir Kelvinong Abdullah. Thank you for watching and stay safe. Welcome back to Money Matters Extended on Buletin TV3 YouTube channel. And we still have with us Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad. Now Tun, can we move along to the region of ASEAN? Should ASEAN play a bigger role in the economic recovery post-pandemic, leveraging on the population of ASEAN as a trading hub?
Yeah. We have always talked about ASEAN and its 600 million people. This shows that it is a good market, but ASEAN has not worked closely together to take advantage of their size and their wealth. And because of that, there is achievement in the sense that it is one of the original regional cooperation that has been able to be still functioning. Many regional organizations have failed. But ASEAN has achieved the target of bringing the countries together, avoiding conflicts and confrontations. In that sense, it has done very well. But economically, ASEAN has not actually made use of its big market and wealth in order to grow the ASEAN economy, well, much more than what is happening at the moment.
So looking at ASEAN again, does Malaysia have the advantage to bring in FDI as we would be competing with our ASEAN neighbors who are basically stepping up their game to make sure that investments come into their countries as well?
Well, FDI is something that I claim was invented by Malaysia. Because when we became independent, most newly independent countries refused to allow foreigners to come in and invest. But Malaysia went the other way. We decided to invite even the former colonial masters to come back to Malaysia in order to invest and help grow the economy. But now everybody have seen that this strategy, FDI, is very helpful in helping the economy to grow. So they now offer to host foreign direct investment. And they have the advantage of having maybe cheaper labor, more skillful labor perhaps. And because of that, the investors now have a choice of coming to Malaysia or to the other countries. Now Malaysia will have to compete and offer better terms if Malaysia wants to attract foreign direct investment now. Before it was easy because there was no competition. But now we are competing with our neighbors. So the amount that comes to Malaysia may be less than it should be. But I think it is now time for Malaysia not to depend upon foreign direct investment. we need to have our own industries, large industries, which cater to the world market.
Right.
And this we have seen in the glove industry. When we went into the glove industry, it was not very big, but now because of COVID and other problems, the glove industry has become so big that it is actually the biggest glove producing country in the world.
Right.
So we need to look. We need to look at other rubber products, for example, and also to look at our resources and go big in those industries.
Right. Now, Tun, regarding the FDIs and looking at the current incentives and policies, is this enough for reinvestment in Malaysia?
Well, as I said, we cannot compete with our neighbors. They have lower costs, and they have a lot of workers also. And Malaysia at times had to depend upon foreign workers to do the work of the new industries brought into Malaysia. So we actually cannot compete with the other ASEAN countries. That is why I suggest that we do not depend too much on foreign direct investment. We should initiate our own industries and grow big on those industries. There are lots of products in the world which Malaysia can supply and manufacture and supply, and we should identify them and go big as we have done with the glove industry.
So looking at excerpts from the book, can I touch on what you've mentioned, that the civil service, if I'm quoting here, is bloated, and that one challenge that you faced when you became Prime Minister a second time was dealing with a civil service that has lost its professionalism and senior servants enriched under previous administration. So in a nutshell, how would we have to address this bloated civil service?
Well, when I was Prime Minister first time, I tried to reduce the number of people employed by the government. This I did through privatization. I moved out telecoms and a few other government functions to the private sector, thus reducing the cost to the government of administrating the country. That was done, and I think by the time I retired, there were only about 1 million government workers in the civil service. But within a very short period of time, it went out to 1.6 million, 600,000 more new employees. And this, of course, would be a burden on the government. A lot of the money, the revenue of the government is spent on payments to the civil service, with leaving less money for development.
Right.
So that is not a wise way. Actually, the employment of people should be done by the private sector. Government should stimulate the private sector so that they create jobs, not government offering jobs. So now the budget is difficult to manage because most of the money that is that comes to the government is spent on running the country,
Right.
on administration, on payments of the operation, with very little money left for development.
Right.
That is not very good for the country, because the country needs to build better infrastructure, for example. So that is why I feel that perhaps we should move out some of the government servants into the private sector. They shouldn't be left unemployed. You shouldn't sack them, but move them into the private sector where they can actually earn more money. And at the same time, the government does not have to bear the cost. And if the private sector succeeds, as in the case of telecoms, for example, when we move out telecoms to the private sector, telecom, which was not making profit, made a lot of profit, and the government collected more revenue. At the same time, the government doesn't have to provide allocation for telecoms. 200 million a year and doesn't have to pay for the staff costs.
The problem here, I see where the civil servants are concerned, is job security, because they do think that because they are working for the government, their job is secure until their retirement age. So it's basically also changing the mindset. Would that be one of the things as well, Tun?
Well, we give them a choice. You can go and join the private sector, or you can stay with the government. But if you choose to stay with the government, you cannot later on try to go to the private sector, because the private sector pays better, much better than the government. The only thing about the government is that you have a pension. But for the private sector, there is the KWSP, the Provident Fund, and you can benefit from that. But the income from the private sector is usually higher than the government can afford.
Right. You have also always expressed your concern about the younger generation of Malays and that they remain stuck in the old ways of doing things. And you also said that you can't change them, but you are concerned about their children, the next generation, so to speak. So basically, what type of approach can we use to change the mindset of the people?
Well, I think Malaysians do not read their history. They don't know their history well. Many of them do not know even about how independence was achieved. We need to know our history completely. The decision before the British came, the period during the British regime, what the British did, and what are the changes we achieved after we became independent. Mm-hmm. Many of the people do not know. For example, during the British period, the Malaysians were not allowed to do certain business, banking, for example. That is why the moment we became independent, 2 applications for banking license were made by the Chinese community, because under the British, they won't give the banking license. Also, all the businesses were carried by British firms. Mm-hmm. All government procurements were through the crown agents. So they keep the Chinese businessmen out. Of course, the Malays were not involved because they didn't do much business. But they keep the Chinese out so that the Chinese cannot grow. And the Chinese at that time were mainly involved in retail business, shops along the streets and all that. And they couldn't grow very well. But after independence, everything is open to them. So they became, as you can see, they became very, very successful.
Right. As it is all over the world, the divide between rural and urban prosperity is a given. But in Malaysia, you mentioned in your book that this is also amplified by racial differences. Do you think this is unique only to Malaysia?
Yes, it is. Because in Malaysia, we tend to preserve the different races that live in this country. Mm-hmm. We don't have a single national identity. We allow, from the very beginning, we allow people to be identified according to their countries of origin. And because of that, in Malaysian society, the races are quite distinct. They are not just Malaysian, but they are Malaysians of this race, that race. Mm-hmm. And then we find that their occupation also is different. More business is done in the towns, of course, mm-hmm. but mostly by one race. And in the rural areas, there is another race. And there is a disparity between urban and rural. So when you have that disparity, even if it is single ethnic, there will be conflict.
Right.
But here we have not only conflict due to rich and poor, but also between different races. And that is dangerous. Right. What happened in 1969 was because the Malays thought that the people in the town were rich. All the cars and the buildings belong to these rich people. So they came to the town and they burned the cars, knowing that it is not their car. But if we achieve a mix so that in the urban areas and in the rural areas, the people are not identified by race, not completely of one or racial origin. If they come to the town now, if they burn cars, they're likely to burn their own cars.
Yes, true. Now, you also wrote a lot about the jump-starting the national education. I know this is something that's very close to your heart, and the importance of English as well, which you have mentioned in your book. I actually particularly like what you wrote about Japan, where you said, there it is knowledge itself that is important, not the appearance of intelligence. Page 205. So, is there no quick fix to our education system, in your opinion?
Well, I believe that we need to do a thorough, reversal of the current education policy. I think we are not doing the right thing at this time. It may have been right before, but now the whole field of knowledge has changed. There is much more stress on science and mathematics. And so we need to catch up with other nations by upgrading our education system. And the way of teaching also needs to be changed. We still feel that the way to impart knowledge to students is by the teachers in the class, teaching the students. But today, we can record and play back lessons. So what we can do is to record and record the best student, the best teachers giving lessons, and that should be screened in the class with the class teacher guiding the students. That way, we have the benefit of the best teachers teaching the whole country. What is happening now is that some schools get good teachers and do well, and then some schools get bad teachers and they fail. See, so but this new method, because you can record, you can play it in the class, you can even play it at home. You can repeat and see the lessons over and over again. And that means that the way of acquiring knowledge is much more easy if we use modern technology.
Right. So it's saying, so you are saying that we are not evolving fast enough in keeping up with the other countries where education is concerned.
Yeah, I think we are far behind. Although in the private sector there are many methods that has been introduced, but the government doesn't want to accept the new ways of teaching that has been developed by the private sector.
Tun, on that note, thank you very much for appearing on our program, and we wish you all the best. Thank you again.
You're welcome.